I am 87 years old, and I want to tell you about 15 years I lost without anybody taking them from me. I gave them away. I built each day exactly like the day before it, so carefully and for so long that the years stopped being years. They ran together into one day, repeated, and I lived inside it the way a man lives inside one room. There were 9 small rebellions that finally broke it open, 9 ordinary acts of unfamiliarity, none of them bigger than moving a chair. I wrote them down last winter on the back of a seed envelope, and when I finished, I was not ashamed and not proud. I felt honest, maybe for the first time in 15 years. Come sit down a while. Pull your chair close the way you would to a fire burned down to its good coals. Now hear me plainly. I am not telling you those 15 years slipped away from me. I remember them fine. That is the first place people go, and it is the wrong door. And I am not telling you I was lonely. I was not. My son called. The neighbors waved. The trouble was not in my heart and not in my head. The trouble was in my habits. I had built a life so tidy and certain that nothing unfamiliar could get in the door. My grandmother did a strange thing every spring. The water bucket sat by the doorway on the left side, where it had always sat, where her own mother had set it. And every spring, when the ground softened, she would carry that bucket to the other side of the doorway and leave it there until the leaves came down. I asked her once why she bothered. Her hands shook by then, and it was not an easy carry. She said she did it so her hands would remember they were hers, and not the door's. I was young. I thought it was fussing. I thought it was an old woman making work. She had a saying, too, and it is the spine of everything I will tell you tonight. A path is a kindness, she said, until it becomes a rope. So here is the first confession and the first rebellion with it. I took the long way to the same place. There is one road from my gate to the post office in town, and I had driven it so many times my hands did it without me. 11 minutes. I could have named every mailbox on it. Then one Tuesday, for no reason I could name, I turned up the Ridge Road instead. 9 minutes longer. And halfway along it stood a barn fallen in on one shoulder, with a young walnut tree growing straight up through the roof of it. That tree had been there for years. I had been 11 minutes from it my whole life. My grandmother used to say a creek that finds a new channel keeps its water sweet, and the one that runs the same cut year after year silts itself shut without ever knowing it. There was a man in the valley named Eli who walked home by a different street every evening for a year. He said afterward that he had lived in that town 40 years before he ever saw it. Before I go on, let me set something down beside you. Everything my grandmother handed me, I put into a small book called The Native Way, and it is waiting in the description below if you would like to sit with it a while. There is no pressure in that, none at all. I am here with you either way, tonight and tomorrow both, and that does not change, and it never will. I will tell you one thing ahead of time so you know what you are waiting on. The 9th rebellion is the one I am least proud of. It is the one I had to sit with the longest before I could put it down on that envelope in my own handwriting, and I am not going to hand it to you early. It waits at the end where it belongs, and I think you will know why when it comes. Now, the 2nd rebellion. The 2nd confession, if you want the plainer word for it, and I do. I sat in a different chair at my own table. 41 years I took the seat with my back to the window, because that was my seat, because a man has a seat. Then one evening I carried my plate around to the far side and sat where my wife used to sit. From that chair I could see the top of the hill. The light came across the table from the other direction, and the salt was in the wrong place, and it was not the same room. 10,000 suppers I had eaten in a room I had only ever seen one wall of. My grandmother said the hawk moves one branch over and it is a different valley beneath him. Same trees, same water, a different valley. There was a woman we called Grandmother Weaver. who turned her loom to face a different wall each spring. And when they asked her why, she said the pattern came out truer for it. The third rebellion, and the fourth and the fifth came all in the same season, and they belonged together because each one of them took the same thing from me, my dignity, in small change. The third was this: I let a younger person teach me something I was clumsy at. The boy who brings the hay is 15 years old, and he plays a mouth harp better than anybody I have heard. I asked him to show me, and for a month I was terrible at it in front of a child. I made a sound like a gate. He did not laugh at me, which was worse, and I had to be a beginner out loud, which I had not been since I was a young man with a young man's excuses. My grandmother said the new shoot bends because it is still growing. The branch that has finished growing is the one that snaps. There was a man named Samuel who let his granddaughter teach him a hand-clapping game, and he could not get it right for 3 weeks. He said afterward that he had laughed harder in those 3 weeks than in the whole year standing behind them. The fourth was that I said yes before I had a reason to. I had been turning down invitations by reflex for years and calling it choice, a card night, a ride out to see the leaves turn, somebody's grandson getting an award in a school gymnasium. I would hear the question and my mouth would already be shaping the no, and then I would build the reason afterward and be proud of how reasonable I was. My grandmother said a door left latched all summer swells shut by winter, and then it is not a choice anymore. It is just a door that does not open, and you can call that whatever you like. There was a man named Walter who accepted every invitation for 1 month. He hated 2 of them. He said the 2 he hated were still better than the whole month before them. The fifth was that I asked a question I did not already know the answer to. I had gotten to be a man who tells. I had my answers loaded before people finished their sentences, so I sat with my son on the step and I asked him what the hardest part of his week had been, and I did not guess, and I did not finish it for him. And he talked for 20 minutes about something I had never once suspected. My grandmother said a cup that is already full catches no rain. There was an old fellow they called Standing Pine who asked more questions at 80 than he had asked at 30, and he was the only man in that valley anyone told anything to. People walked past 4 houses to get to his. I used to think that was because of what he knew. It was not. It was because of what he wanted to find out. And now my grandfather comes into it, because he said a thing to me once that I did not understand until I had gone ahead and become the man he was describing. He said a man does not get old the morning his legs fail him. He gets old the morning he can tell you exactly how the day will go, and he is right. I had been right about my days for 15 years. The 6th and the 7th are both about my own house, so I will give them to you together. The 6th was that I kept 1 hour of the day with nothing assigned to it. 2 o'clock to 3. No task, no errand, no program running in the corner. Nothing waiting at the end of it. The first week I hated it. I felt useless, and useless is a hard coat for an old man to wear. Then in the second week I began to notice things. The gate makes a sound at 1/4 past. The light comes off the tin roof of the shed and lies across the floor and moves, and I had lived under that roof 30 years and never once watched it move. My grandmother said a field left fallow 1 season is not an idle field. It is a field getting ready. The 7th was that I moved 1 thing in the house on purpose, so my hands had to think again. I put the kettle on the other side of the stove. I moved the coat hook 1 peg down. For 2 weeks my hand went to the old place every single time, and every single time I had to come back and find the new one, and I felt foolish, and I did it anyway. My grandmother said a path worn into the grass tells your feet where to go, until your feet forget they were ever allowed to choose. And that was the morning I finally understood the bucket. 60-some years I had thought she was a fussy old woman making work for herself, and she was not. She was keeping her hands hers. She was doing on purpose, once a year, the exact thing I had stopped doing for 15. The 8th was that I learned the name of somebody I had been nodding at for 11 years. There is a woman at the end of my road. I had nodded at her from the truck since before my hip went bad. 11 years of nodding, which I had counted as neighborliness. So I stopped, and I rolled the window down, and I asked her name. It is Marguerite. She came over an ocean when she was 19 years old with a suitcase and no English in her mouth. She buried a husband. She raised 4 children in a house I have driven past 11 years. She told me she had been waiting a long while for somebody to ask, and she said it kindly, which made it land harder. My grandmother said, "A well you never lower a bucket into is only a hole you walk around." I had assumed a whole life was a nod, and now the 9th, which I have kept back, because it is the one I am least proud of. I told a story I had never told before. I had 6 stories. 6. I had told them so many times that they had stopped being memories and had become furniture, and I would move one out into the middle of the room whenever a silence needed filling. The one about the flood. The one about the bull. Everybody could say the last line with me. So one evening my son stood up and took his coat off the chair to go. And instead of the flood, I told him about the night I was 17 and sat in a truck outside my own father's house for 2 hours because I could not make myself go in and say the thing I had come to say. I had never told anybody that. Not his mother. Not him. He stood there a moment with the coat in his hand. Then he put it back down on the chair and sat, and he stayed another hour. My grandmother said a stone that sits in the same stretch of river long enough goes smooth, and a smooth stone catches no light at all. Now I want to say something carefully, because I have watched men my age hear a list like this and turn it into a stick to beat themselves with. Naming these 9 was not the same as hating myself for them. It was not. I sat with that seed envelope, and I did not write down a single thing about the kind of man I am. Sameness is not a character. A man does not have sameness in him the way he has brown eyes or a bad temper. And it is not a condition either. Nothing was wrong with me. Nothing had to be fixed in me. Sameness is a habit. That is all it ever was. A habit is a thing that got built one ordinary day at a time by a man who was not paying attention while he built it. And a habit is a thing that same man can notice and set down. I will not promise you the 15 years came back. They did not. Nothing comes back. I will not tell you how long it takes either, because I do not know, and anybody who tells you a number is selling you something. I only know that the days stopped running together. Not because I became somebody else, because I moved a kettle, and I took the Ridge Road, and I asked a woman her name. So let me gather this up for you now, the way my grandmother gathered the ends of her shawl, the long way to the same place, a different chair at my own table, letting a young person teach me something I was clumsy at, saying yes before I had a reason, asking a question I did not already know the answer to. 1 hour with nothing assigned to it. One thing moved so my hands had to think. One name I finally asked for. One story I had never told. 9. That is the whole list. Now let me hand them back to you as questions because that is what they really are. Do you know every mailbox on your road? Have you sat in your own kitchen from only one side of it? When were you last clumsy at something in front of somebody younger? What was the last thing you said yes to before you had a reason? What do you ask, and what do you only tell? Is there an hour in your day that belongs to nobody? Whose name have you been nodding at? And how many stories do you have left that you have never told? There is somebody watching me tonight who is asking a quieter question than any of those. I know it, because I asked it myself with a pencil in my hand at 87 years old. Is it too late for me? I am not going to hand you a promise. I do not know what your days will do, and I do not know what anybody around you will do, and I would not lie to you at my age. Here is what I do know. 87 has taken plenty from me, but it has not taken the ability to notice one habit. and it has not taken the ability to make one ordinary choice. That is small. It is also enough to start with, and it is yours tonight, whatever your age is. Now I would like to hear from you. Of these 9, which number landed closest to home, and which one did you feel in your chest before I finished saying it? Tell me down in the comments. I read them, all of them, slowly, with the lamp on. And if this hour sat well with you, then come back and sit with me again tomorrow. I will keep the chair pulled close, and I will keep the coals going. Take care of yourself out there tonight.